Thank you for listening to Dialogues on Democracy, celebrating IFAS's 25th anniversary. I'm Laura Osio. Electoral fraud has been studied for decades, but it had never been defined in a practical way that allows for its detection, deterrence, and mitigation. In a recent white paper, IFAS presented a definition that can help stakeholders identify and address the problem. Chad Vickery, IFAS Regional Director for Europe and Asia and co-author of the paper, talks to us about this definition and how it will help promote electoral integrity. Electoral fraud has been studied for decades, but there's very little work on how to detect and deter it. Why is this?
Well, I think the actual terminology and definitions has largely been left to academics and think tanks in the past. But I think electoral integrity is a new term that's being used, in which encompasses many of the things that IFAS works on: voter registration, campaign finance regulations, complaints adjudication, results of transmissions. So this has introduced us to the topic in a new way. And so I think that we're focusing on it both from a practitioner's point of view, but also an academic's point of view. It's interesting because fraud, malpractice, corruption, and other issues have suffered regrettably from a lack of agreement about the definitions and the interpretations of the terms. Therefore, with the lack of agreement on the definitions, it's difficult to design specific programs that detect and deter fraud. And that can be verified through observation and other means.
How does IFAS define electoral fraud, and how does it differ from malpractice?
We're focusing on the intent of the parties involved. With that in mind, our definition of electoral fraud is the deliberate wrongdoing of election officials or other electoral stakeholders which distorts the individual or collective will of the voters. And here, as I said before, the focus is on intentional wrongdoing. Whereas electoral malpractice is a breach by an election professional of his or her relevant duty of care resulting from carelessness or neglect. Again, the main point here, the absence of intent and the breach of duty of care by those responsible for administrating free and fair elections.
How does this clear definition help combat fraud?
Well, I think having clear definitions can help us as we assess fraud. And therefore, we're working on methodologies on how to assess fraud. And the definitions will help us form which way we go on these studies. They'll also allow practitioners and administrators to properly identify the type of actions and wrongdoing they're dealing with and the way in which they can respond to the issues. For example, somebody who intentionally manipulates a voter registry should be prosecuted through the law, whereas somebody who just negligently doesn't keep the voter registry right probably needs more training, may need suspension or what have you, but the way that you deal with the problem is completely different based on the definition.
How has IFAS's experience over the past 25 years helped us reach this point in defining fraud?
As I described earlier, the term electoral integrity has got us re-engaged in this topic. For years, we haven't been engaged with academics and think tanks on these types of questions, but we are now. And we bring a unique perspective to the debate based on our years of experience. We show evidence of theory rather than just theory. We could see if a theory works or if it doesn't work, and we have to adjust it in the timeline of an actual project to see if it's effective or not. So this brings a whole new perspective to the debate that others that don't work in this area can bring.
How does this relate to IFAS's larger electoral integrity portfolio?
Well, working with election commissions to ensure the integrity of the electoral process is at the heart of what IFAS does. So therefore, knowing the definition and way to deal with fraud and malpractice, the distinction of these things helps us get to the core of our work on the integrity portfolio and ensuring free and fair elections for citizens.
For more dialogues on democracy, please visit ifas.org.